Good morning, everyone. My name's Tess. I'm a writer and storyteller. And today I'm taking you to a very special hidden location to share a new story I wrote. Here we are. Welcome to the Reading Nook. This story is actually inspired by my two nieces who are 4 and 8 and who are just absolute joys to be around. They're so sweet, playful, funny, and also so different. My older niece is very creative, likes to draw, likes to roughhouse as well, whereas my younger niece is very much into, princess clothing, dressing up. And they're so different and such joys to be around, and I get a lot of inspiration from them. Today's story is a story about a unicorn called The Unicorn Motion. I hope you'll enjoy. Marie had her pointing device, a stack of papers, and a determined look on her face. She also had sticky tape, which she let Lizzie be in charge of. Liz had no pointing device, no papers, an oversized tape dispenser, and a short attention span. She also had to run everywhere, swinging her little elbows back and forth and pushing out her belly in pursuit of her feet. One day, the poor child would learn how to walk. While Marie would be doing most of the talking, Liz supported the cause in other ways. The youngest of the two sisters was in full uniform, from her sparkly rainbow-colored sandals to her light-up unicorn tiara. In between, there were unicorn socks, a unicorn dress, unicorn rings on 3 of her fingers, and finally clip-on unicorn earrings. Liz was ready to serve as the perfect ambassador for today's cause. That cause, you guessed it, was unicorns. Unicorns in general, and one unicorn in particular. "We're ready!" Marie shouted to the entire house. Somewhere within that house, Mom and Dad had been eagerly waiting, of course. After 5 seconds, "We are ready!" Marie screamed again. Standing a few steps from her sister, Lizzie made a face and covered her ears, but then screamed the same words even louder. "Girls," Dad shushed him as he poked his head into the living room. "Lower the volume, please." Dad was holding an egg timer, which he put down on the cupboard next to him. Meanwhile, Mom could be heard coming down the stairs. She paused in the doorway between living room and hall when she noticed the girls and her husband staring at her. "Did you call about dinner?" she asked Thomas. "No, he gestured at the girls, before disappearing into the kitchen again. The oven had its own timer, which was now beeping. Dad retreated into the kitchen, rummaged around for half a minute, and returned with the second egg timer. This one was shaped like a chicken, actually. He placed it beside the first, on the living room cupboard. "Dad!" nagged Marie. She was nervously shifting in place, lightly scrunching the drawings in her hand. In the meantime, Liz twirled around in front of the unlit fireplace. She was looking at her skirt in the glass reflection. The tape dispenser she'd been put in charge of already went missing, as Marie had predicted. "Yes, Mimi, I'm here," Dad nodded. With the chicken and egg ticking beside each other on the cupboard, Dad sat down on the living room couch. Mom followed his lead. "Is this about the unicorn?" hollered Marie, interrupting her mother. Mom turned away from Dad and folded her hands over her knees. "The perfect companion," said Marie with great conviction. From her stack of papers, she took the first one and draped it over top of the television set. The rest of the paper she handed to her sister for safekeeping. Marie moved her pointing device from her right hand to her left. Perfect! She swung it toward the TV. Companion! The little pink hand at the end of the pointing stick smacked the paper and the TV screen underneath. Mom flinched. The picture draped over the television was of a white, starry-eyed unicorn head with a purple, yellow, and green horn. Right below the drawing, and right up to the edge of the piece of paper, Marie had written the word companion, except there was an E between the M and P and a Y where the I should be. Marie grabbed some more papers from Lizzie's hand to line up next to the unicorn head. A few weeks ago at school, Marie had given her first presentation, and while that one covered a much more boring topic, so boring she'd forgotten which, Mimi was hooked. Presentations were in fact an excellent way to get an adult's attention and to get them to do things. A case made in writing was a case an adult couldn't ignore. So it happened that Mimi made her case for unicorns in a series of carefully crafted drawings. And Liz got involved because, as the little sister, she had to force her way into anything her big sister did. They are smart and strong, Marie began her argument, before focusing her attention on the most important unicorn feature, the magic horn. With a tiny hand at the end of her pointing stick, she circled the brightly colored horn in her drawing. Purple was her favorite color. Yellow and green she'd added for realism. Now, neither sister knew the lore behind the horn. Despite unicorns being the talk of the playground, none of the children at school were aware that the horn was called an alicorn, or that it had healing properties. But they understood it was magical, which was the key part. Magic fixes everything, from a cold to a bruise to a tummy ache. So I'll never miss school again, Marie concluded her opening argument. That is compelling, Dad responded. He looked over at Mom, who quickly nodded her approval. Yes, compelling, she agreed. You'll never have a sick day again. A pet unicorn keeping the girls healthy for school was perhaps the strongest argument of the entire case. Marie faltered somewhat in her next arguments, and as Lizzie became more and more of a distraction. It will play with us and be my friend when... Lizzie! While still pointing her stick at the television, Mimi chased her sister around the coffee table. On the side of the couch, where Mom and Dad were sitting, Liz had to slow down and found herself cornered. Lizzie, gimme! Ordered Mimi. Marie yanked the remaining few papers from her sister's hands. Drawings 7 and 8 were of a unicorn in a superhero cape and of a unicorn in a cozy barn, respectively. These were to illustrate that, on the one hand, Marie would take very good care of the unicorn. On the other, a pet unicorn would keep them safe from robbers and bandits. They fight crime? Frowned Mom, turning to Dad. I don't know, honey. Yes, context was missing there. Having reached the end of her presentation, Marie returned to the left side of the TV. She would summarize the best arguments in the case to really drive her point home. By this time, Liz had lost all interest. The unicorn princess dug a remote from in between some pillows and tapped the power button. Lizzie, no! Yelled Mimi. Music came blaring from the television set. A second later, the chicken timer on the cupboard went off, followed by the egg timer shortly after. And with her sister trying to grab the remote from her, Lizzie started wailing. Her cries drowned out the music video still pounding on the TV. Lizzie, stop! Marie stomped the floor in frustration. As the remote went back and forth between them, Each of the sisters stepped up their whining. The living room had grown so loud that Mom and Dad could merely mouth words to each other. Dad swept away the ringing timers and disappeared into the kitchen. Facing the girls and sighing, Mom got up from the couch to take away the remote. "Girls, enough," she said, calmly but firmly. Liz let go rather quickly. Marie let go too, but only after angrily slapping the floor with her stick. "Ow, Mimi!" Unfortunately, Mom's foot was in the path of the swooping pointing stick. Marie jumped and dropped her weapon. She hadn't intended to hit Mom, or Mom's foot, or Mom's pinky toe that was already turning red. While Lizzie's wailing softened to a whimper, Mimi went into a complete crying fit. Mom turned off the TV and nursed her little toe. "Dinner's ready," Dad informed no one in particular. He'd left the kitchen and was now standing next to his wife with his hands in his pockets. "I left it in the oven," he smiled down at her. Eva grimaced back, massaging her foot. It would take a few minutes for the crying to stop, a few hours for the house to feel quiet again. At bedtime, Dad collected the unicorn drawings from atop the TV. He went to tuck in Mimi. Mom had already tucked in Liz. "So can I get one?" asked Marie. She looked over at the drawings left on her nightstand. At the foot of the bed, meanwhile, Dad was moving aside plushies to plop himself down. He leaned back on his arms to consider his daughter's question. She did make a compelling case before, and she did put a lot of effort into her presentation. "Mom and I will discuss it," he responded at last. To Marie, that sounded like yes, which was all she needed to hear. Beaming from ear to ear, she fell back onto her pillow. After a quick goodnight hug, she closed her eyes to pretend to sleep. In fact, she'd be daydreaming for most of the night. The sanctuary lay at the edge of town, where the farmland began. Home to over a dozen unicorns and ponies, the Humble Horseshoe was just a short drive away from Marie's. She went there 2 weeks after her successful presentation, during a school break. In the car were Mom, Dad, Lizzie, Mimi, and an entire bag of unicorn treats. Dad had insisted on healthy ones, so fruit and vegetables only. The owner of the sanctuary, a chatty lady with curly ginger hair, led them around the stables. It didn't take long for Marie to spot her unicorn, a pale palomino colt named Parsnip. Digging their hands into the treat bag, Mimi and Liz each grabbed a big carrot. "Its nose is so soft," Marie whispered. She handed over the carrot with one hand and stroked Parsnip's nose with the other. Next to her, Liz stood waiting, hesitantly. "Look, Mom," Mimi said, peeking at her parents. Mom and Dad had been looking the whole time, but moved a few steps closer. "It's so soft," she repeated. Indeed, Parsnip was lovely, shiny and soft. So lovely that Mimi didn't even ask about the missing horn, though Dad had an explanation ready if she ever did. And she didn't question why Parsnip had to stay at the sanctuary, as much as she wanted him to come home with them. Mimi had found her perfect companion. From then on, Dad would take her to visit every week. Sometimes Lizzie would join, Mom too whenever she could. At the Humble Horseshoe, Marie learned all about those hornless unicorns. She cared for and cuddled them. And in turn, they gave her more than she ever imagined they could. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this little fairy tale, and I wish you a wonderful, restful day. See you soon.